everybody, and welcome to an exciting episode of Echo Live. My name is Anna, coming to you from the Michigan Science Center's Echo Distance Learning Program. But today we are going to be joined by, of course, our MySci staff astronomer and NASA Solar System Ambassador, Paulette. And Paulette is here to talk to us about what is up in our night sky tonight. So if you haven't done so already, go ahead, introduce yourself in the chat or comments feature of whichever program you are tuning in on. Oh, I can hear myself echoing here. Ta-da! If you haven't done so already, go ahead and introduce yourself, practice using that chat feature because that is your best way to communicate with Paulette all throughout our program today. You can ask Paulette questions about what you might be able to see in tonight's night sky or other space-related questions. Paulette is going to continue joining us every Thursday throughout the summer with more virtual planetarium programs, with more exciting space content. So with that, Paulette, why don't you come on in?
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to see so many of our familiar faces from our Echo Live programs. Like Anna said today, we're going to be talking about what's up in our nighttime sky tonight. So let's go ahead and switch over to our virtual planetarium. And there we have it. So we're looking at our nighttime sky. If we go outside, a little after sunset, we're going to be able to see a lot of these things up in the sky. And we've turned off our city lights. So remember, in the city of Detroit, we have city lights around us that block our view of the nighttime sky. But we're able to see a lot more because of that lack of light pollution. Now, looking into our sky, you can see that we're currently facing the direction south. We're going to start to be able to see a lot of our summer constellations up in the sky. And if we look in our southern sky right here, we have a bright red star. Now, we've talked about in Echo Live before how stars can come in different colors. They can be red, they can be orange, yellow, blue. This one is one of those cooler red stars called Antares. Antares actually literally translates to anti-Aries, because a long time ago they used to confuse this star right here with the star, or with the planet Mars up in the sky. So this is Antares, anti-Aries, or not Mars up in the sky. Now this star right here is actually part of a constellation that we have up in the sky that looks a little bit like that. Now tell me, does this look familiar to you? Has anybody seen anything like this up in the sky before? Does this look familiar to anybody? If anyone has seen the movie Moana, you might recognize this constellation right here. This constellation was actually used in the movie Moana, and it was Maui's fishhook. That fishhook was used to pull the Hawaiian Islands from the sea. So Maui's fishhook is right up here and is actually a real constellation up in the nighttime sky. So we have our constellation right here. Now it actually isn't the fishhook. This is something that we call an asterism, or a collection of stars that forms a picture, but it's not one of our official 88 constellations. Does anyone know what constellation this actually is? Again, does anyone know what constellation this actually is? It's Maui's fishhook in Hawaiian culture, but when we talk about Greek and Roman mythology, this constellation has a different name. Now, some people might be familiar with this constellation if you're familiar with the zodiacs. And if you don't know, that's okay. This constellation right here is Scorpius the Scorpion. So Scorpius is up in the sky right over here. And if we actually bring up the art, we'll be able to see that Antares is actually sort of like the heart of Scorpius the Scorpion, although in this picture it sort of looks like the brain. So we have the claws that go up here, and all the way down and around we have the stinger. So here we have Scorpius the Scorpion up in the sky. Now we have another constellation in this part of the sky right over here. But before I tell you what this constellation is, I want you in the audience to use your imagination. What do you think this constellation looks like? Before we bring up the art, what do we think this constellation looks like? This one looks a little funny to me. But I want to hear from you. What do you think this constellation looks like? Using our imagination, we might be able to see different pictures up in the sky than the pictures that the ancient Greeks and Romans were able to see. What do you think this constellation looks like up in the sky? We have some people chiming in about Scorpius the Scorpion. That is definitely right. Again, what do you think this looks like? I think that it kind of looks maybe like a tree branch. I also think that this kind of looks like a teapot. It's a little teapot, short and stout. There's the handle, and there's the spout. And when it gets all steamed up, the Milky Way comes out. So here we have the teapot up in the sky. Now, this is another one of those asterisms, well-known collections of stars that make a picture, but it's not the official constellation. As you can see coming off of this teapot, there are a lot of different sort of like spiky, weird things. The ancient Greeks looked up in this part of the sky, and they actually thought that this looked like a half-man, half-horse archer named Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is up in our sky right over here. And the really neat thing about Sagittarius is the fact that he's actually pointing us to the very center of our Milky Way galaxy. So we can see this cloud of gas up in our sky. This cloud of gas is the Milky Way galaxy, or at least the edge of it that we see. And this right here, the tip of the arrow, is actually pointing us towards the center of our Milky Way galaxy. And I think that that's pretty cool. It's pointing us to the one or two supermassive black holes that, along with all of the other matter in our galaxy, is helping to hold the whole thing together. So these are two of our summer constellations that we're able to see. Now, here in Detroit, we're actually pretty lucky that we are able to see these constellations, because if you go a little bit further north, these constellations are actually so far below the horizon that they're not visible. If you go a little bit further south, like our friend Evan in Texas, he'll actually be able to see these a lot better from his vantage point where he is. So these will be either higher or lower on the horizon, depending on your latitude, depending on where you are in the US or even in the world. If you're in the southern hemisphere, you might not even be able to see them at all. And if you're at the North Pole, you definitely won't be able to see them either. Now, these two constellations are some of our more famous summer constellations, because they are part of our zodiac constellations. These are what we call zodiacs that people use to find their horoscope in the newspaper, something along those lines. But if we go right up over here, we're going to find some more summer constellations. Now, what I like to do is, if I can see the teapot of Scorpius, I actually like to follow the Milky Way up to these three bright stars right up over here. We have Vega, Deneb, and Altair. What do you get when you draw lines between these three stars. What shape do we get? If we draw lines between these three stars, what shape do we get? We get a triangle. So this triangle is known as the summer triangle. The three stars, Vega, Deneb, and Altair, are actually part of three different constellations called, we have one right up over here, another one right here, and another one right over here. So these three stars are actually part of three different constellations. This one is sometimes known as the Northern Cross. We can see the sort of line down this way, and then wings go, or the cross going across like this. Or you might be able to see a very long body and wings going across right here. This is actually known as the Cygnus the Swan. If we look right up over here, we're going to see the other constellation, the next one. And this one, to me, when I look at it up in the nighttime sky, I think it looks like a juice box, or maybe one of those really old cell phones that had the antenna coming off of it. If you haven't seen one of those before, ask your parents. Maybe they have a picture of one of the really old ones and they'd be able to show you. But I think it looks like an old cell phone or a juice box. But this is actually supposed to be a constellation called Lyra the Harp. So we have Lyra the Harp up in our sky right down over here. If we continue around our triangle, we'll get to our last constellation right here. And this one, again, sort of looks like a cross. We have something here in the middle and something going across right here. But when the ancient Greeks looked up in the sky, they actually saw a constellation called Aquila the Eagle. So there we have Aquila sort of stretching across the sky. So these are most of our summer constellations that we are able to see up in our nighttime sky right now. But along with these summer constellations, we're always able to see something a little bit more, or at least right now and this time of the year. So let's go ahead and bring them up, because I hid them for a little bit so that we could see things a little bit better. Along with our stars, we've talked about this a lot on Echo Live. Along with our stars, what else might we be able to see up in our nighttime sky? Again, along with our stars, what else are we able to see? We've done entire shows specifically on some of these things that we're able to see up in our nighttime sky, but we haven't seen them from our point of view in a long time. The last time we did a constellation show, we were able to see the spring constellations, but now we're well into summer and checking out our summer constellations as well. What are we able to see along with the stars up in our nighttime sky? What types of objects? And Evan has it. It's planets and moons. Exactly. So up in our sky right now, we have right here the brightest thing up in our nighttime sky. This is the moon. So if we look a little bit closer at our moon, we're going to see that it's actually very, very close to being full tonight. It should probably be full either tomorrow morning or tomorrow evening, looking at the shape right now. And we can see all of those craters on the surface that we've talked about in depth. So we've got our craters on the surface. We have the darker areas, which are Maria. They used to think that those were oceans of liquid water. Turns out they're not. They're frozen lava plains, but we can see our moon nice and bright up in our sky. We're also able to see a couple of planets up in our sky right now. if we look right over here to the southeast, we're going to be able to see two very bright planets. I want you to guess, which planets do you think we have right here in our sky? Two very bright planets in our sky. And I'll give you another hint. These are also two very big planets in our sky as well. So two very bright planets and two very big planets. What do we have up in our nighttime sky right now? Two very bright and very big planets. We have the largest planet in the solar system right over here. And here we have the ringed planet. Evan guessed Venus and Mercury, and that's a super good guess because Venus and Mercury are also very bright in the sky. Mercury is actually the brightest planet that we're able to see. Mercury is also pretty bright in our sky, but unfortunately, Mercury never really gets far enough away from the sun, so we wouldn't be able to see it this far out from where the sun is. We have Jupiter and Saturn right here. So if we take a nice close look at Saturn, we'll be able to see what it would actually look like if we were looking at it through a telescope. If we were looking at it through a pair of binoculars, it might look something a little bit like this. And if you have a larger telescope, you might be able to get a little bit of a closer view and actually see a shadow of one of Jupiter's moons on the surface. If you go outside at exactly the right time, you'll be able to see that. Now, these four objects that we see around Jupiter, remember, these are not stars, but these are the four Galilean moons of Jupiter: Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. If we move on over to our planet Saturn right over here, we can zoom in a little bit, and we're going to start to be able to see its rings. Now, if you looked at Saturn with a pair of binoculars, it would kind of look a little bit like this. It would have, Galileo called them earlobes. They sort of looked like ears around it. So it would look like a different shape. Now, if you looked at it with a pair of binoculars, it would sort of look like a floating football. You might not be able to see the space between the rings and the planet itself, but you would be able to tell that it's a little bit different than the other things that we see. When you look at a star with a pair of binoculars, it looks like a pinpoint of light. But when you look at a planet, it looks like a floating sphere or floating ball out in space. And Saturn is one of those that sort of looks like a floating football. So a little bit of a closer look. We have Saturn right here with the rings around it. And we can actually see some of its moons as well as we get a little bit closer to the planet's surface. All right, so that's mostly what we are able to see up in our nighttime sky tonight. We're able to see, remember, we'll go back over them. We are able to see Scorpius the Scorpion. We're able to see our summer triangle. And I'm actually bringing up a few other constellations as well as I'm sort of clicking around. Now, some of you may have heard of the 13th zodiac. If you've heard of the 13th zodiac, you might know this constellation right here. This constellation is called Ophiuchus. Now, the reason that Ophiuchus has become the 13th constellation is because it kind of snuck its way into the line of the zodiac. We call that line that the path makes throughout the course of the year, we call that line the ecliptic. So if I bring up our ecliptic, we might be able to see it a little bit better. Here we go. Ecliptic grid. There we are. So the path that the sun makes throughout the course of the year moves through these constellations right here, where it equals 0. So you notice that the planets move along the line of the ecliptic, as does the moon. But notice, as we follow this line, we have all of the other constellations that we're able to see in the ecliptic. So there we have Libra, Virgo. We even have Leo right down over there. But this constellation right here snuck his way into that line of the ecliptic. And that's because of something that we call precession. So our Earth is actually sort of like wobbling like a top. If you ever spin a top on a table, it'll go straight up and down, and then it'll start to sort of wobble around. Because of that wobble or that precession, that's why this constellation didn't used to be in the zodiacs, but it is now. So like I said, you might have heard recently that the zodiacs have slightly changed, and we've added sort of this 13th zodiac constellation. So like I said, that's pretty much it that we can see up in our nighttime sky tonight. Does anybody have any questions for me today? Oh, I see that Evan says that they're a Leo. That's really exciting. So that means that you were probably born sometime in August. The reason we have these zodiac constellations is because the sun is in these constellations on the day of your birth. And the sun actually moves through these constellations throughout the year. So if I bring up our time and date, I can actually move us to a little bit earlier. So we're able to see that where the sun is. Let's see. We're going to get rid of the atmosphere because that's just making things complicated. There we go. So now taking a look, if anybody remembers the constellations that we've talked about, earlier on in our program, does anyone remember what constellation this is right here? It has 2 stars in it, Castor and Pollux, if that gives you any sort of hint. What constellation is this up in the sky? So we have Castor and Pollux, 2 stars in this constellation. If anybody remembers our Echo Live programs from the past, you might remember that this constellation is called Gemini the Twins. So you can actually see that the sun is in Gemini the Twins right now. It's within that constellation. And that's why someone would have a zodiac constellation, because of where that is. All right, do we have any other questions? Around what year did the 13th constellation enter the ecliptic? You know, that is a really, really fantastic question. And I honestly don't know what year that happened. Now, they've just recently made the changes to the zodiacs. So it probably maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, they started officially including Ophiuchus into the zodiac constellations. But it probably entered the ecliptic a while ago, maybe a couple hundred years ago or so, but it's been such a long time since we since the ancient Greeks named the constellations of the zodiac, and even noticed that it was moving the same path across the sky, that they just kind of came up with the zodiac constellations, and nothing really changed until relatively recently, at least from the zodiac perspective. From the scientific, from the astrological perspective, from the astronomical perspective, that stuff has definitely been changing over time, and we try to make some adjustments, but that doesn't always happen or catch up to the astrological. So that was a really, really fantastic question. Thank you so much, Amber. All right, do we have any other questions about anything that might be up in our nighttime sky right now, or anything else that we might have been able to hear about astronomy or other things? While we're waiting for some questions,
We are, of course, going to take a moment to thank the sponsors of the Michigan Science Center, like Ford Motor Company Fund and Denso. They allow us to bring these programs to you for free every Tuesday and Thursday. So going forward, remember that we are still having Echo Live all throughout the summer. You can catch Echo Live presentations on Tuesdays, and Paulette will be here every Thursday with a new virtual planetarium program. We'll talk more about what you can see outside. We'll talk about other cool space facts. And I know a little bit later this summer, Paulette has some really exciting announcements coming from NASA itself. So Paulette is our ambassador to NASA. If you ever have any questions about what's going on at NASA, what's going on with the future of human spaceflight, all that, Paulette is your way to get answers. She's got really exciting updates coming to us. We will be back next Tuesday, of course, at 2:30. So if you are enjoying Echo Live, please make sure that you are liking and subscribing to the Michigan Science Center on our YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all that. And of course, our most exciting announcement, if you are in our local area, we are reopening to the public on Friday, July 10th. So we will be open for you to visit us in person, check out some of our cool space-related exhibits, all the other really fun stuff we have here inside the building itself. We're really thrilled to have everyone come visit it. Visit the Michigan Science Center's website for more information. You can reserve your free tickets because admission is free all summer. And with that, thanks, Paulette, for joining us. I hope we'll see you back here next week. Everyone else, have a great weekend.
All right. Bye, everybody.